Welcome to Headstones and Microphones Founder Stories, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched first-person simulation of history's most visionary founders. I am your host, Calvin. While we've added some creative storytelling, our goal is to inspire your own study of these trailblazers. Now, let's meet our guest. Today we are joined by the legendary Suntan King himself, the founder of Hawaiian Tropic, Ron Rice. Ron, welcome to the show, man. It is awesome to have you here.
Calvin, thank you so much for having me.
Let's dive right into it. The vision ahead of its time. When you first conceived of your business, the world was a very different place. What was the exact moment you realized society was moving in a direction only you could see? And how did you convince the early skeptics?
Back in the late 1960s, the sun care market was dominated by massive, clinical-looking brands like Coppertone. People used thick, white zinc oxide or chalky lotions, but I was spending my summers working as a lifeguard in Daytona Beach, and I loved to travel. I took a trip to the Hawaiian Islands, and I noticed the local women on the beaches weren't using those heavy chemical lotions. They were mixing up their own natural concoctions, using exotic things like coconut oil, avocado, and native fruits. I realized right then that the world was about to shift away from chemical clinical products toward a lifestyle of natural wellness and sensory experience. People didn't just want protection, they wanted to smell like a tropical vacation. Convincing the early skeptics wasn't easy because I didn't have a giant marketing budget. I just took my early mixtures right down to the lifeguard stands and the pools in Florida, letting the people who lived in the sun try it out firsthand. Once they smelled that signature coconut aroma and felt it on their skin, the product convinced them for me.
That is wild. Talk about trust in your gut, which leads right into the next question. The original leap of faith. Leaving behind safety to build something entirely unproven is a massive gamble. What did your life look like the day you decided to go all in? And what was the core belief that gave you the courage to take that first step?
My life back then was stable but very modest. I was working as a high school chemistry teacher and a football coach in Florida, making about $4,300 a year. $4,000 of that was for teaching, and $300 was for coaching. I was comfortable, but I always had this burning entrepreneurial drive since I was a little kid selling apples and honey on the side of a mountain in North Carolina. The day I decided to truly risk it, I had to swallow my pride and borrow a mere $500 from my father just to buy raw materials. My core belief was simple. I knew I understood the chemistry of a great product, and I knew the absolute, undeniable power of the beach lifestyle. I believed that if I could bottle the essence of the tropics, the brand would take on a life of its own.
A $500 loan and a teaching background. That's incredible. Let's talk about an unwavering conviction. In the absolute beginning, when you had no data, no capital, and no blueprint, what was the one truth you held onto that everyone else around you dismissed?
The one truth I held on to was that the fragrance and the image of the product would create an emotional attachment stronger than any traditional advertisement could ever buy. People around me thought I was crazy to challenge the corporate giants with no capital and no blueprint. They thought a bottle of lotion mixed up by a school teacher wouldn't stand a chance. But I refused to dismiss the sensory experience. I knew that the moment someone popped open that cap and smelled the rich blend of coconut, mango, and avocado, they would instantly be transported to a paradise mindset, no matter where they actually were. Image and feeling were everything, and I clung to that truth when I had absolutely nothing else.
It really is an iconic scent. But it couldn't have been all smooth sailing. The first ruinous setback. Long before your company became a household name, you hit a wall where everything nearly collapsed. Take us back to that first major failure. What went wrong, and how did you find the willpower to restart?
Oh, the early days were filled with trial and error, Calvin. In the very beginning, I was literally mixing the ingredients together by hand in a 20-gallon garbage can right in my garage. One of my first major setbacks came down to pure operational chaos. I had hired a couple of 11-year-old neighborhood boys to help me fill the bottles from the garbage can by hand. We didn't have automated lines or quality controls yet. One day, a huge batch of the formula didn't emulsify correctly because the temperature in the garage got too high. and we ended up wasting a massive portion of our raw materials, which represented almost all the capital I had left. I thought it was over before it even started, but I looked at that garbage can, thought about my father trusting me with his hard-earned money, and realized failure wasn't an option. I adjusted the chemistry, waited for the cool of the evening, and started mixing again from scratch.
From a trash can to a global empire. Speaking of public perception, let's look at the public misunderstanding. Innovation often looks like madness to contemporaries. Was there a specific product, philosophy, or strategy you were utterly convinced would work, but the public initially rejected or ridiculed? How did you respond?
When we first started expanding, our entire marketing strategy was built on lifestyle, beauty pageants, and high-energy sponsorship rather than traditional medical or clinical claims. People in the established corporate world completely ridiculed it. They thought running local swimsuit competitions and sponsoring race cars, like our Hawaiian Tropic Porsche that Paul Newman eventually drove at Le Mans, was a ridiculous, flashy gimmick that serious consumers wouldn't buy into. They thought it cheapened the product. I responded by doubling down. I knew our audience. I knew that the beach culture was about fun, vitality, and vanity. Instead of backing away from the critique, we leaned entirely into the lifestyle marketing, and it eventually made us the second largest sun care company in the entire world.
You definitely knew how to throw a spotlight on the brand. What about the mental weight of leadership? Behind the legendary name was a human being facing immense pressure, whether from financial panics, internal betrayal, or personal doubt. How did you shoulder that burden without letting the vision splinter?
The financial pressure in the first few years was absolutely staggering because we started essentially from zero. Our cash flow was always razor thin, and the big corporate competitors eventually woke up to what we were doing. By the early 1970s, they realized we were a real threat, and they used their massive distribution networks to try and squeeze us off the store shelves entirely. It was terrifying, and the stress of potentially losing everything I had spent years building in my garage kept me up many nights. I shouldered that burden by staying incredibly close to my team and remembering my roots as a country boy. I kept that original garbage can in my living room as a physical reminder of exactly where I started. It kept me grounded and reminded me that if I could build a multi-million-dollar brand out of a trash can, I could survive a corporate price war.
That is a legendary anchor to keep in your house. Let's look at the people who helped you get there. The first true believers. Who were the very first people, beyond your immediate family, to buy into what you were doing? How did you convince early workers or customers to trust an entirely unproven concept?
My very first true believers were the local lifeguards and beach vendors along Daytona Beach. I would walk right up to their stands, hand them these unlabeled bottles, and say, "Just try this." They were the toughest critics because they lived in the sun all day long. Once they realized it actually protected their skin and kept it from drying out, they became my biggest advocates. For the early sales team, I found hungry, local guys who loved the beach as much as I did. One of my first sales guys used to run a tiny scooter rental stand right on the sand. I didn't convince them with fancy financial projections. I convinced them by sharing a vision of a fun, sun-drenched lifestyle where they could make great money just by sharing a product they already loved.
And it clearly paid off for them. Let's talk about the tipping point. Can you take us to the exact moment where you felt the momentum shift? What was the specific milestone, contract, or breakthrough where you realized, we aren't just going to survive, we are going to change everything?
The definitive turning point for me happened around 1973. Up until then, we were scrambling for every single order. But by 1973, our distribution finally clicked on a national scale, and our competitors genuinely panicked. They started launching aggressive counter campaigns against us, and that was the exact moment I smiled and thought, we aren't just surviving anymore. If the billion-dollar companies are this scared of a boy from North Carolina, we are about to change the entire industry. The momentum became an absolute tidal wave after that.
That must have been an incredible feeling. Now, forging the culture. You didn't just build a company, you built a distinct culture and philosophy that outlasted you. In the early days, when it was just a handful of people in a room, how did you instill that standard of excellence or service?
We lived the brand, Calvin. In the early days, there was no separation between our work life and the beach lifestyle. I instilled that standard by ensuring that everyone we hired truly loved the sun, the ocean, and the positive energy we were selling. We treated our operations like a tight-knit family, but we maintained a fierce pride in the quality of our ingredients, the real coconut oil, the aloe, the avocado. I made sure everyone knew that even though we were having a blast and throwing massive beach parties, our product had to perform flawlessly under the hot sun. The fun was our outward face, but quality was our backbone.
That authenticity shines through the whole history of the company. Let's look at how history remembers you. The greatest myth of your legacy. History books often flatten a person's life into a neat, polished narrative. What is the biggest misconception people have about your journey, your character, or how your company was actually built?
I think the biggest misconception is that Hawaiian Tropic was an overnight success or that it was built effortlessly by a flashy playboy who just liked to party on yachts and drive Lamborghinis. People saw the lifestyle I enjoyed later in life and they assumed the business was always a breeze. They don't see the 8 years I spent balancing teaching and coaching while mixing lotion in a hot garage, or the years of being completely broke, or the fact that I grew up a dirt-poor mountain boy selling wreaths on the side of the road. It took an immense amount of grueling manual labor and grinding salesmanship to get that bottle onto global shelves.
Behind the glamour, there's always a ton of hard work. That brings us to the defining sacrifice. Building an empire always requires a steep personal cost. Looking back at the entirety of your life, what was the hardest sacrifice you had to make for the sake of your vision? And was it ultimately worth it?
The hardest sacrifice was undoubtedly peace of mind and personal stability in my early adult years. While my peers were establishing steady careers, buying homes, and enjoying quiet weekends, I was working around the clock, entirely consumed by the business. I poured every ounce of my physical energy, my weekends, and my personal relationships into keeping the company afloat during those fragile early years. It was a stressful, volatile way to live for a long time, but looking back at the full journey, it was absolutely worth it. The happiest day of my entire life was the day I was finally able to hand my father back his $500, look him in the eye, and thank him for believing in me when nobody else did. You can't put a price on that.
That gives me goosebumps, Ron. Last question from the main list. A message to day one. If you could send a single sentence back through time to yourself on the very first day you started this venture, knowing every trial, triumph, and heartbreak that awaited you, what would you say?
I would look at that young school teacher standing over a garbage can and say, trust the chemistry, keep your feet in the sand, and never let the big corporate giants scare away your small town heart.
Beautifully said. Ron, before we sign off today, do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories you shared that you'd like to leave with our listeners?
I just want to say to anyone out there listening who has a dream brewing in their own garage or their own mind, don't let a lack of money stop you. If you have a quality product, an authentic passion, and the willingness to work harder than anyone else, you can achieve anything. Calvin, thank you again for bringing me on. It has been a beautiful afternoon, and I'm deeply grateful for the conversation.
Thank you so much, Ron. Wow, what an incredible journey from a $500 loan and a hometown trash can to a global icon of the beach lifestyle. Ron Rice showed us that with a distinct vision, authentic branding, and unwavering conviction, you can truly build an empire from scratch. And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast, Founder Stories. Remember, legends may die, but their stories never do. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.